You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. I am honored to have been in the company of Barkley Stuart, the EVP of Federal Government Affairs at Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Barkley was an open book in our conversation. We chatted all about his journey to his current role, which is incredibly unique, growing up in New York, raised by a feminist mother connected with change makers like Gloria Steinem in the women's rights movement. He shared these early influences that really shaped his worldview and led him to where he is today. He also talks about his role at SGWS and how he is deeply passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the beverage industry. And he talks a lot about his advocacy in this space and the importance of fostering inclusivity. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite glass of wine, and enjoy the show. Barkley, welcome to Served Up. I am so happy to have you as a guest on today's show.
It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm excited to be with you as well.
Well, thank you. Can you share a bit about your background and professional journey that led you to your current role at SGWS?
Sure. It's all a question of how far back you want to go.
I would like to take it all the way back. Did you go to college, Barkley? Where did you go? Where did you grow up? Let's really learn a little bit about who you are.
So I grew up in Greenwich Village in New York City, and I am the son of an early feminist. And I mentioned that early on because it really does play a big role in what I've tried to do at Southern Glazers. I went to grade school and high school in New York City. I went off to college in Rhode Island. I started a business doing computer consulting. I met my wife, who is Ann Glazer, the granddaughter of the Glazer founder, Max Glazer, in 1984 on an airplane flying from New York to Dallas. And that's a story in and of itself. And we lived quite happily in New York City. She's an artist, and I was doing the computer consulting thing and also helping to run a business my mother had started that did documentary production and teaching the use of video as a tool for social development. But then in the 90s, my father-in-law, Robert Glazer, who was the Glazer CEO at the time, had a bad stroke. And my wife and I decided that we wanted to be closer to him and closer to my mother-in-law and closer to the business. So we packed up and moved to Dallas with our two little kids. And I started working at Glazer's in 1998.
It's absolutely amazing. Can we talk about being raised by a feminist? What was that like for you? How did that influence yourself early on and today?
As I think I sort of alluded, it was huge. It was, I think I take a lot for granted, but growing up in Greenwich Village at that stage in the women's movement, it was a relatively small group of people. And our house was kind of a revolving door for Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan, and these were all my mother's friends. And it was a really interesting time. And so as part of that, my mother was really adamant that she wasn't going to raise a son who was a chauvinist. And I can remember her saying those exact words to me from almost as early as I can remember. Barkley, I am not going to raise a chauvinist. And so one example of that sometimes I talk about is my mother took me at age 15 to the first United Nations Conference on Women, which was held in Mexico City in 1975. So it was me and about 3,000 women at this conference, and my mother was producing a documentary there with global women feminists, and it was another one of those kind of life-changing experiences for me.
That's incredible. In 1975. And so my mother, and, I always tell a story about my mom working for like Argonne National Laboratory, and they asked her to step down when she was pregnant with me because she was pregnant with me, and they forced her to quit. And all the women, instead of, throwing her like this big baby shower, they went and burned all their bras in front of the welcome sign. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and that was in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. And so 1975, were a lot of the topics the same that you're hearing today? Have you seen things change? You really had a unique perspective as somebody growing up in a household with truly icons of the feminist movement.
Yeah. I don't know how to answer that concisely. I mean, I think a lot of the issues are the same, but things have changed too. What became really clear to me with the exposure that my mother gave me was that governments, businesses, not-for-profits, churches all work better when there's balance of representation sitting around the table. That's just as clear as day to me. It may not be to everybody, but that's something that is just an axiom to me. And so when I look at data that shows that businesses that are more diverse perform better and last longer and have happier shareholders, I feel like that's my mission in the wine and spirits industry. And candidly, there's a lot of opportunity within the wine and spirits industry. So it's on the one hand, it's sort of easy target and any progress is huge. On the other hand, there's a lot of history and momentum that has to be broken down in order to be successful. More recently, just to kind of riff on what you've been asking me about, but more recently, I represented Glazers and then Southern Glazers to the industry's national trade association, the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. The way that works is that you're invited to join the board, and you start out as second assistant vice president or something, and you step up year by year, and ultimately you become the chairman. And in 2018. I was the chairman of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. Mm-hmm. And I made, diversity and women's advancement my kind of call to action. Yeah. And it's funny because we're about to have an event where I'm supposed to help reflect on what's happened since then and what the challenges are coming up, or how it is that we keep the ball rolling, keep the movement moving. In the history of women's advancement, 2018 to 2024 isn't that long, but it was pre-Me Too movement. It was pre-Harvey Weinstein. And we, Southern Glazers, and we, the wine and spirits wholesalers in total have made significant progress in that period of time, just not nearly enough. So, how it is that we keep the eye on the ball, how we keep motivated, how we keep emphasis on it. I'm concerned by some of the conversations that are taking place around, DEI becoming a partisan issue or becoming political. I don't see it that way. I see it as both a basic issue of justice and a basic issue of good business.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And as EVP of Federal Government Affairs, what does your day-to-day routine, typically entail? I think a lot of us, especially, I think a lot of our listeners are very curious about your role, what it is, and what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, there isn't an average day. It varies quite a bit from day to day or week to week. But for example, last week I took the new CEO of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America to Modesto, California, to introduce him to the leadership at Gallo. Gallo, is by far the largest winery in the world, and was where I kind of started my wine and spirits career. I had a Gallo convenience route in North Dallas, and I felt like, given how wicked smart Gallo is and how influential they are, that it's a critical relationship for on the government affairs policy front for the wholesale tier to have with one of our most important suppliers. So I took him out to Modesto, and Gallo rolled out the red carpet for him, took him on a tour of the winery. They showed us a tank that they have there that holds over 1 million gallons of wine, which I forget the exact statistic, but I think that tank holds more wine than 90-something% of all wineries produce. And it was one of many sitting out there in Modesto. And we had a great conversation with them. And so that's that's one example of what I do. I go to a lot of fundraisers for different politicians, mostly Senate candidates, but pretty much across the board. What else do I spend time on? I spend time a lot on the advancement stuff, women's advancement and diversity stuff. I also spend time as a board member of both Glazers and Southern Glazers.
Yeah, that's incredible, Barkley. It really is. And I can see that from your day to day. You're probably never bored. That's probably just so different every day you wake up, right? And you come to work.
You don't need to feel sorry for me. I have a great life, and I really take pride in the things that I am able to do for this company.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Given the dynamic nature of government relations, can you share some of the challenges you faced in your career and how you've overcome them?
I'm not sure that the challenges or the cycle of things that I face are that much different from anyone else. You press hard on the things you believe, and you dust yourself off and pick yourself up if you don't succeed in the first pass at what you're trying to do. If you believe in something, you stick to it, and you look for a different approach. Some of the battles that we as wholesalers fight are things like direct shipment or tax issues, or there was some news this past week about Drizzly being folded into Uber Eats. Drizzly is something that I was very involved in from almost the very beginning, and served on the Drizzly board until it was sold to Uber. Again, as part of my role in government affairs. I'm of sort of two minds in terms of how to reflect on that news of Drizzly. I believe that we, the wholesalers, really did a good job at demonstrating that there's a way to meet consumer demand without necessarily blowing up the safety and regulation that, is the 3-tier system, is the system that we live and operate under. On the other hand, Drizzly going away as a brand is sad. That's an adjustment. I believe that the impact of Drizzly will be sustained in Uber, that most, if not all, of the retailers that were being served through Drizzly have been transitioned to Uber Eats, and that the principles around safety and in-person delivery are maintained within the new system, but that will remain to be seen.
Can you talk a little bit about the three-tiered system, especially for our listeners that perhaps are not familiar with the term? What is it? How did it come to be? And why is it important?
Sure. I guess, I'd start by saying that in the United States, we have the safest, most diverse, most profitable system for alcohol regulation in the world. And I think that's something to be proud of. And I think that we have it because of the regulation that exists, not in spite of the regulation that exists. So, a long time ago in the, pre-prohibition, I guess that's 1921 is when prohibition started. Alcohol was in the U.S. was similar to how it now is in other parts of the world, where the producers had a lot of influence over bars and restaurants and retail stores, and they were almost proprietary. So you had suppliers that controlled outlets, and when they controlled those outlets, they weren't interested in having any competitive products in their stores. So it was much harder for smaller brands or brands that weren't part of that controlling producer to be available in those outlets. And there was much less emphasis on overconsumption. So that's really what led to prohibition, was that alcohol was being abused. And repeal of prohibition was an opportunity to do a reset on what were our values as a country in terms of how alcohol should be treated. And the thinking that went into the repeal of prohibition was that alcohol was different from other products, that it was something that, if used improperly, could be detrimental to an individual and therefore to society. But that when regulated properly, could be an enhancer to people's lifestyles. So there was a system that was put in place called the three-tier system, as you called out. And the three tiers are producers, wholesalers, us, and retailers. The regulations said that each state could, in effect, create their own system for regulation as long as there was separation between producer, wholesaler, and retailer, and that there wasn't cross ownership, in order to prevent some of those areas that created less safety and more potential abuse pre-prohibition.
It is very clear. I think our listeners will completely get it, because basically, before prohibition, folks, it was like the wild, wild west, and it wasn't always safe, and it wasn't regulated, and you didn't know what you were drinking. And during prohibition, we had things like bathtub gin, that was literally sometimes made in a bathtub, y'all, right? And it was poison.
Yeah,
so
it seems like every other week you read about some sort of tainted alcohol incident in some other country, because alcohol isn't taken as seriously as it is in the U.S. But I think it's also really important that, and maybe not appreciated, but the diversity of brands and the ability for a new brand to get into the market is, much easier in the United States than it is in other parts of the world, because the retailer is not beholden to a particular supplier. Retailers welcome new products, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And also, partnering with a house like, Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits, there's so much support within our sales team, and they're highly educated as well. They want to know about the product. They want to really understand it. So when they go into their customer's place of business, they have that story of the brand to tell.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Which is absolutely amazing. With the various stakeholders, and really you kind of named them all through the 3-tiered system that are involved with day to day. How do you strike a balance, between the interests of the distributor and the regulatory requirements, really ensuring the alignment and compliance?
We try to work really carefully with the regulators in the various markets where we do business. It's a partnership. We view our role as wholesalers as being the people that make alcohol safe.
That's a great answer. It's a good one. All right, Barkley. Very good. For individuals that are really aspiring to enter a career in federal government affairs, do you have any advice really based on your own journey that you could give?
I think that you have to first really understand how business is conducted. So something that was really helpful for me was being a salesperson. I think you need to understand and appreciate that, wholesalers are dependent and reliant on the partnership we have with our suppliers. And we're dependent and reliant on the partnership we have with our retailers. And that, being in the middle can be complicated at times, but that it's a critical role. When we are the representative for alcohol in a state, we have a more important role in terms of the regulation. And so we end up working closely with for instance, in Texas with the TABC, or in New York with the liquor authority. Those relationships become critical.
You've been with Southern Glazers, or even with Glazers, now with Southern Glazers, for a very long time. What changes for the good have you seen in the beverage industry throughout your career?
I guess I'd come back to the women's advancement piece. I've been fortunate to be able to be an advocate for a lot of women as they have grown their careers in this industry. You have no idea how fulfilling that is, and how gratifying that is, to be able to feel like, you've been able to watch people succeed, watch people grow, and at the same time do something that's going to help the business. It's just kind of a win-win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's been such a shift for women, for diverse people in general in our industry. I've been in the industry for 30 years. So for some time, and I've been on every end from owner to bartender, do you name it? I think that I've done it. I've even done dishwasher duties, you name it, right? And it's really cool. I think that the time that we're in today, just the opportunities that's really open to everyone, it's a beautiful time to be in the beverage industry, way better than it was back in the day. And I come from a long line of females that were in the beverage industry as well, Barkley. My grandmother, Rosella, lived above the bar. She was kind of her mother's bar back, and then her mother's mother, they all owned a bar in Coal City, Illinois. And I always joke, if you know where Coal City is, we are related, no doubt, right? But I grew up with their stories and their struggles and all of it. And to see where we are today is amazing. And I take great pride in working at Southern Glazers because they give females platforms and opportunities that you don't always see in other companies. It's truly, in all my years at Southern, it's beautiful to see all the different support. Cindy Haas and I were talking recently, very recently. There's all these cheers to different groups here at Southern Glazers. We talk about them on the show often. And one new one that she and I are both going to join, and I can talk about it because she was on the show recently, we mentioned it, was Cheers to Menopause. This is how open Southern Glazers is, folks. I mean, they're definitely not afraid to step in and step up. It's really cool.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So since we're doing shout outs,
yeah.
So a prior guest of yours is someone who I've partnered with on some of the women's advancement work, Carissa Lawrence, who is in the Office of Strategic Management now. Mm-hmm. When I was getting ready to give that speech that I gave, calling out my emphasis on women's advancement or making that my cause, Carissa or Rissa was my partner both in helping to edit and develop the speech, but also to design a program that we call Women in Leadership, where each year we've sent about 30 women from across the industry, not just Southern Glazers, to a program that's hosted by the Columbia Business School or several Columbia Business School professors. And it's a 5-week, 10-session program designed to help give women the tools they need as they're growing in their roles and responsibilities. And Carissa was in the first class and also my partner in developing and designing the program, and has maintained that role with me. And that's one of the examples I guess I would call out of how nice it's been able to, how gratifying it is to see people as they've grown in their careers. Chris is just a poster child for that. Yeah,
she sure is. What's next for you, Barkley?
What's next for me? Mm-hmm. So, I also work a lot with Jennifer Chaplin, Tolkien, and she's been doing great work with the panels that she's been doing on women leaders in the industry. I guess I'm thinking about, what women's advancement DEI 2.0 looks like in the wine and spirits industry. I haven't got it figured out yet. We need to turn the camera around a little bit and not put the emphasis just on the women who are advancing, but on the people who are supporting and working with the women that are advancing. How is it that we need to change? And how is it that we should be supporting people in that journey? I think the biggest challenge that we at Southern Glazers face right now is not at all. It's not recruiting strong talent. It's making people feel welcome and supported in their journey. And it's not even so overt as that we're not welcoming and supportive. It's just that it may be that someplace else does a better job of it than we do, or the very fact that it can be lonely to be a woman in leadership where there aren't many other women. I don't know if I feel like I'm rambling there, but
you're not rambling at all. I think you just made a really great point, because representation matters, especially when you're in a boardroom, especially when you're at work, to see someone that looks like you or is the same sex as you in the leadership roles, to have that same collaborative spirit when you're in a boardroom versus feeling like you need to sit in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's a story that it's a little bit old at this point, but that really made an impression on me. There was a senior leadership meeting that I was sitting in on for Southern Glazers, and there were 3 of our strong women leaders in the room with about 12 of our strong male leaders in the room. And the 3 women who were not at all shy in most situations that I've ever seen them in were much more cautious, were much more subdued in this room. And it was a real clear illustration of, the power of numbers in both directions, and how important that balance piece is. That, I could see the women being much more guarded in how they challenged other people in the room and how they expressed their opinions. And it was just a perfect example to me of where Southern Glazers was missing something. by not having more women around that table.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I do think that a lot of that has to do, and I can only speak as a female here, is that when you are bold in any situation where you are outnumbered, male to female, a lot of times you get a target on your back that maybe you're being aggressive. You're the B word, right? Versus you're just being bold and speaking your mind and trying to get down to the brass tacks, where men are a lot of times celebrated for being bold. With women still today, most times than not, we are just not. We get a label put on our back and a target put on our back. So 1,000%, it's important to have that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole nother podcast session on in order to be heard, you have to be aggressive. But once you're aggressive, you're stigmatized. And how you walk that line, how you achieve that balance, how it is that you really gain influence without being dismissed, I think is a really interesting dynamic.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I'm so happy to have met you and to learn about your story and how you're championing really all these awesome initiatives throughout the company. And I know that it's genuine and it comes from such a good place. And that's why it's working. I mean, that's why it's effective. It's not just to tick off a box.
No, it's really sweet of you to say that. Yeah.
To create change. So, thank you for doing that. It's incredible. And I have to ask you, because you're on the podcast, we are called Served Up and we are in the beverage world, Barkley. What's your go-to drink?
I'm a wine drinker, probably first and foremost.
Okay.
And I like, I tend to like the wine I'm drinking. I'm definitely in love the one you're with
sure.
when it comes to wine. But if I'm seeking out something, I tend to, I like Barolos and Barbarescos quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I like white Burgundies quite a bit. I tend to be I'm not as keen on over oaked Chardonnays. I tend to prefer a more minerally. But there's a new grape varietal I tried. I've been drinking the last couple of years, Timorasso, which is also from northern Italy, that I like quite a bit. I love to experiment. I've been enjoying wines from Sicily, from Etna. Quite a bit. So I don't have a single answer for you, but.
That's a good answer. I never have a single answer. I would say it depends on the season, depends on the day sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
But as a wine drinker, I just want to ask you, and especially because we work, for Southern Glazers, can we just talk quickly about the change in the wine world and how crazy it is to navigate and how open and new it all is compared to maybe 20 years ago? So when you look at a menu, it's like, holy moly, where do I start? Right? It's so fun. I think that there's just so much out there that just wasn't before, so much more that's available to discover.
And I think you have to do just exactly what you're describing. You have to embrace the idea that it's about discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I think too often people wait for, what makes wine less approachable to people is they feel like they are going to make a mistake or that they don't have enough information or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish there was some way to really just put the emphasis on experimentation and that the right answer is what you like and that not everybody's going to choose the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. And not be afraid to try, right? Mm-hmm. To try something new that's on the menu that maybe you're curious about. Mm-hmm. I think the wine world is terribly fun current day.
I think it's why the on-premise is so vital in terms of the industry is that you can have a server or a sommelier or someone who can share their experience. And that's a way of learning, of trying something that you might not have tried otherwise.
Absolutely. And, they are really the ones that are going to tell you the story of the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's a family. And a lot of times it's generations of producers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's terribly romantic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's why I love wine. I think that has a great story to tell.
Yeah.
So, yeah. With that, Barkley, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to spend with me here on Served Up. And on behalf of the Served Up family, I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. Thank you so much. Cheers to you.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do, Bridget. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Kill the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!